Hi everyone, this is Julie Bruns. Welcome to the Peace and Possibilities podcast. I want you to thrive and be happy, peaceful, and content, no matter where you are on your journey. This podcast shares stories that will show you how it can be done, no matter what your circumstances. You'll be inspired and come away with a new spark of an idea. Never forget, anything is possible. New episodes are released every Wednesday. Subscribe, rate us, and leave us a review. This helps others find our content and get happier sooner. To possibility and beyond. Hi, everyone. My guest today is Dr. Jacinta Jimenez. And Jacinta and I met via LinkedIn, and I reached out after I saw you on something, or I read about. I know I was inspired by something I saw with you in it. And so I reached out to you because the whole premise of this podcast is to have people on that love what they do so that other people can see themselves doing what they love sooner rather than later. They don't have to wait till they're 50 like me. So thanks for joining me. I'm really happy to have you here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I love the topic of your podcast and about, figuring out meaningful work and learning lessons from others who have kind of found their way towards meaningful work.
I created this because I wish I would have had it when I was 12 really.
Yeah.
But 22 when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do in the world. And obviously podcasts probably weren't around, or radio shows were back then. But I always wanted like a bunch of wise people to guide me in my life. And so I didn't have so I'm creating what I didn't have. And hopefully someone along the way says, oh yeah, I'm glad I know that now. And that's the whole premise. So thanks.
Totally. 100%. I love it.
So I know that you are a psychologist, and I know that you went to Stanford. I read that. And I know that you are a coach. That's all accurate. Okay. What I would love to know is if you started out thinking, I want to study psychology and get a degree and be a psychologist, or I want to be a coach, and psychologist is a great way to get, obviously, to know about people's brains and how they work. How did that all start for you? And did you always see yourself doing what you're doing now?
Absolutely not. So I had no idea that I was going to be a psychologist. Someone told me in high school or something, you're going to end up a coach and a psychologist and working in technology. I would have laughed. So I thought I was going to be a dancer. That's all I wanted to do.
Was a dancer? To be a dancer.
Yes. Okay. And so I saw Martha Graham dance. I mean, her technique. And so Martha Graham is this kind of innovator. She's considered she's passed, but she's considered the godmother of modern dance. In a time when there was all male choreographers, Martha came in and challenged us to think differently. And she had, I don't know if you remember Steve Jobs' Think Different Apple campaign, where he had pictures of like Amelia Earhart and MLK and Gandhi. Martha Graham was one of those people featured in his ad campaign. And so I was like, I want to be like Martha. I want to pursue the arts and dance. So I was fortunate enough to study under two soloists who danced directly with Martha Graham. I auditioned and got into the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater's prestigious summer intensive program, and lived in the Fordham Universities in New York, and I was loving it. But I mistook constant movement for meaning and depth. And what I mean by that is that I thought my passion and love for dance was reflected in my unending commitment to pursue dance no matter what. So I danced through a broken jaw. It was wired shut, still danced. I had a concussion. I still danced. I ended up dancing through mononucleosis somehow and injuries, and eventually danced my way into burnout. And the experience was so disorienting for me because it was such a big dream and there was never a question. Like, it was like, yeah, I'm going to dance. And so to be hit with this feeling of, oh my gosh, I'm feeling disconnected from this thing that has been part of me and part of my identity and purpose and meaning. How did that happen? And I had to take a big break and sit back. And I remember like the first even month of like pausing and stopping finally was, I could see my anxiety levels rise, and I had to do a lot of reflection. And what I came to realize, was that I was fascinated by the question, like, how did I go from loving something so much to feeling disconnected? And so I started my whole entire career basically over again in psychology, going, I got to study peak performance, motivation, and behavior change. So my first class as an undergrad was with Hans Steiner on the psychology of sports and performing arts. And I was pretty much hooked from there, but it still breaks my heart to know I left dance. I still love it. And I still wonder. And I just don't want anyone to have to lose their vitality and well-being in the pursuit of doing something they love. But luckily I was able to find meaning in a different way. So that's the other side of the coin. But yeah, it was quite an experience. And I would have never, ever to this day thought I would be doing what I'm doing now. Never.
Crazy. And it's crazy that they're so opposites.
Yeah.
Like one is very creative, obviously, and in body, and movement and all of that. And psychology is like in your brain and
Yes.
in human behavior. And it's fascinating. And I when I heard you say, like I lost dance, like, just because it's not what you do every day with your career doesn't mean you have to lose it, right? You can still be
Yes.
passionate. Yeah.
Thank you for saying that, because that was something I thought I lost it. And then I go, oh, actually, I get to be very creative in what I do. So I bring that creativity with me in all sorts of things that I do. So I've done a lot of innovation with designing coaching programs at scale to help people globally get support and find meaning and purpose in their work and life. But it took a lot of creativity and innovation. So I'm able to harness that creativity. So those skills that made me flourish in dance just got channeled into a new avenue. But it took me a little bit of time to make that connection. I was like, oh, I didn't lose this. The other piece though that you talked about is very true too. Like going from, I feel like it's like dance is so in your body, and then working only knowledge work from the neck up, and having to really figure out ways to get back in touch with that part of me, because the body is so powerful and so important to tend to, and it has so much knowing that's invaluable as well.
And
Yeah.
It's all connected. I know when I was in college years ago, that it wasn't even considered like the mind, body, spirit. It was just like, this is your mind, and then you maybe you play a sport over here, and they're not really connected. But I love the whole sports psychology, and I love that that's all more front and center now, because it is all connected. I'm actually in the middle of this program right now. It's about creating miracles, but like and I read something the other day, if it's not in your body first, if you actually can't embody it, like literally feel it in your body, it will never be in the world. It won't be in the universe. Like you have to feel it inside your body first. And it's just crazy to think that this is kind of new thinking, even though it's really, really old thinking,
Yes.
We're just coming around to it and embracing it now. And it's not feeling so like, that's not really true. It's like the whole study of neuroscience and all of that is just fascinating to me. And I'm so glad that it's front and center now. And that my kids, it's just like second nature to be talking about these things with my kids, instead of the opposite. Like when I was in school anyways, it wasn't even considered.
No.
Yeah.
No, I'm so happy this is happening. Finally, we're getting back to like being human. I feel like even with emotions too, it was like, oh, you can't show emotions at work. And I'm like, no, emotions are, and I say this a lot, like emotions are an important design feature of our DNA. They tell us important things, and we may feel things in our body that tell us important signals. And if we don't tap into our bodily cues, important things that tell us what is meaningful and what is not, what fuels me, what drains me, what is this person sucking my energy or not? And so our body and our emotions are hugely important for signaling and giving us feedback and data that are valuable for using.
So true. And then the whole premise around like, if you don't feel it, that it just is stuck in your body, and then it's not, then you get sick, you get cancer, you get dis-ease, you get all of those things that there's so much research, I'm sure, around the fact that it's not even really in your DNA that got you sick. It's your mind, and thinking all those thoughts and not feeling the emotions and suppressing things that should have been let go of and all of that. It's like, it's just so fascinating. I'm just happy to be able to talk about it and not have people say like, what are you talking about? Like, that's just not, that's not even true. People probably still say that, some people, but I'm glad that you're shedding light on it and you're doing work that's enlightening people, because it's so important and needed for sure.
Yeah, it is. It's so needed.
So, okay, so now you have this career. When you were a dancer and then you got into this career and went back and studied psychology, so along the way, you're figuring out, I'm going to be a psychologist, I'm going to be a coach eventually. What roles were you in, and how were you staying peaceful and content along the way till you figured out like where you needed to land? What were you doing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been like the experience of kind of navigating the field of academia. I worked in academia and healthcare and technology has been up and down for me. In that, I think this big theme of belonging has been a huge one for me. So my full name, my parents blessed me with the name Jacinta Jimenez. So it's a perfect name for me, but it's two J's with two different pronunciations, but encapsulates that I'm a biracial female. My father grew up in poverty, him and his family from Mexico were migrant field laborers. So they would work like for hours a day on their hands and knees picking crops. And then they would follow the seasonality of the crops. So they didn't have housing. They lived in cars and tents, sometimes in barracks with outdoor toilets. And my father's family is incredibly resilient. They put themselves through my dad put himself working at nighttime as a janitor through junior college and instilled in me education. And then on my mom's side, my grandparents only went to 8th grade. So when I stepped onto campus as an undergrad at Stanford, I was like, I don't belong here. Like, I like psychology, but where do I fit in? And so I started covering parts of myself to try to kind of fit in or belong, or try to mold myself into boxes that I didn't fit into. And that was really hard for me until I found El Centro Chicano on campus and this club called Unidas, which is about women who empower each other and give back to the community. And it was my first sense of really deep belonging. And it felt like this weight was kind of lifted off of my chest. And I was freed up of all this energy, this emotional labor, psychological labor of trying to cover parts of me was freed up. And I was able to channel that free energy into my academic pursuits. And I ended up doing really well and graduating with high honors. And I won the Stanford Chicano Senior Award at Stanford University for academic excellence. And it just instilled in me the significance of belonging and how important it is. But as I left school, I go, wait, I don't see any leaders that look like me. I don't see any people in power that look like me. Like, where do I fit in? I've struggled in and out of imposter syndrome and belonging. And so I've come to learn at this point that I think like the very thing that makes me feel like I don't belong is ironically one of my biggest assets, and that I bring a unique lens of trying to always first and foremost think through a lens of inclusion and belonging in everything I do. So whether that's design mobile technology experiences or leadership programs or coaching programs, I want to make sure there's cultural competency and inclusion in there. So it's kind of like this duality of high and low. Like, I love the Buddhist saying, no mud, no lotus, or every rose has a thorn, or anything that shines bright has a shadow. Mm-hmm. I feel like that's belonging for me. Like, I've been able to channel it into something that is giving me a lot of light, but it's also been a very tough process. So I think turning it into something meaningful, the experience of struggling with belonging, mm-hmm. and turning it into something meaningful and channeling that into my work has been a process. I don't think I've mastered it, but it's a process, and it's been really helpful for me to continue to do what I do when hit with challenges or setbacks and things like that.
Yeah, and then it makes you that much more engaged with what you're doing and better at it, because you had the problem and now you're saying, okay, same with me and my business. The whole reason I have this podcast and started this business is because I didn't have what I needed when I was a young college student. And I want to help other people, for the future. But if you are, if you're just going from the premise of, I want to have money or I want to have this thing, it doesn't feel the same way, and it doesn't have the same effect and the same result. But if you come out and say, well, I had this problem and I'm going to help other people solve that problem. I'm going to help other people that are feeling the way I'm feeling feel better.
Yes.
Of course, you coming through that suffering is going to help you be better able to help other people come through that suffering. You're not saying you're not going to suffer. You're saying, when you do, here's how I can guide you a little bit better. I can give you the tools sooner rather than later, in the beginning, whatever it is.
Yeah. I mean, lived it, right? Like most of the time people who come up with the best solutions or help people are most impactful. It's because they've lived it or they know the dissatisfaction that it feels or the pain that it feels. And so being able to really sit in the shoes of the people they want to help is powerful. Yeah.
Yes. And people can feel that. People can feel that you had that struggle or pain.
Yeah.
And, what you did about it. And then you're much, it just comes easier to talk about it and then people solve their problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's awesome. Okay. So what do you think? Let's go back to what would you say to the girl or boy who's feeling the same way you felt? They step on campus and they've earned the right to be at that campus, or that role, that job that they probably didn't think they could get. What would you say to those people that are trying to fit in and have a meaningful career and role? What would you say to that little girl that was you that stepped on that campus and said, what's wrong here? What am I doing? How can I contribute? That kind of thing.
Oh, it's a beautiful question. I love it. I would first validate. I would be like, of course you feel this way. Like I would want to normalize it. Part of being human is that we all crave community and connection. Like that, we are wired to connect in order to survive. We survived in tribes, and we literally come into this world connected literally to another human being. Yeah. Like we need connection so deeply. And so of course you're going to be worried, of course. And so wanting to just normalize it in a lot of ways so that there's not something wrong with you, but they're really emphasizing the realities, but then also saying, just look for the lessons, look for the meaning, look for, what you can take away. I always tell people as a coach, how do you create your narrative of triumph? So looking at hardships through the lens of not shame, but through this lens of, wow, I stepped out and made myself vulnerable, took on a challenge and felt scared and like an imposter and still found my way through it. And the fact that they're still just stepping out onto trying something new, being brave, gosh, I would just validate that and emphasize, look at what you're doing right now. You already have it. Yeah.
I love that you're emphasizing that this is normal part instead of just like, you shouldn't feel that way, you've earned it, you should work here. Instead of just pushing it away, saying, of course you do. Any normal person would feel that this is overwhelming and they're afraid and all those other things. I was recently on a webinar with Barbara Stanny. She's an author. I don't know if you've heard of her. She's written a lot of books about women's finance and financial wealth and health. And she is in her early 70s, and she has interviewed hundreds of women, successful, like millionaires, successful women who've started companies and all of that. She has never, ever, ever talked to one single woman who is not afraid before they did whatever they did. So it's not normal not to feel fear, but people think like I'm having fear, so I should turn away, I should do this. It's like, you are always going to feel it. It's going to be there. And sometimes it's a sign that you shouldn't go down that dark alley, but more than likely it's something that's trying to prevent you from doing something you want to do that's brave and courageous, and you're afraid that you're going to be, like you said, an imposter syndrome and stuff. It's usually all of those things. It's not you should be safe and turn the other way because you're going to be hurt kind of thing.
Yes. Yeah. I love that she emphasized that though, because it's so true. We're all human.
So she's gone her whole life writing books and talking to successful women, and she's never met one woman who was like, yeah, I wasn't afraid. Of course they're afraid. But if you don't hear those stories, you think it's just you think I should turn the other way. I shouldn't be doing this. I shouldn't be here. I don't have the right, whatever it is. And that's not the case. Every single human has probably felt that, and they're still doing it. But if everyone turned away from it, nothing would ever get accomplished.
No. And fear is helpful, but it could oftentimes send us false signals. But it also means that you're doing something courageous too. Yeah. There's the flip side of fear, what's on the other side of that. And I just wish it was more normalized. I love hearing this because I just wish it's like, yes, you're human. Of course, that's new. It's anything new is different. We don't, as humans, we don't like uncertainty. So when we do something that's new or novel or step into, trying a new thing that we care about or trying a new pathway in life or a new career, like, of course, that's going to be nerve-wracking a little bit.
Yeah. Of course, it's going to be nerve-wracking, but you're never going to have what you want if you stay settled and comfortable in whatever it is you're doing. You'll always just be comfortable with, there's nothing wrong with that, but you're not going to have that thing you desire, or that you're not going to take that risk. You're not going to end up in a better spot, a more exciting spot, successful, whatever it means for you. You can't have that unless you feel the fear and do it anyways and be courageous. You just can't. You can stay comfortable, but then you're not going to have that awesome life that you're dreaming about having, because you're going to always have fear. You have to walk through it anyways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Living true to yourself. Yeah. And it makes me think of, also the importance of self-compassion, of just realizing like we are human. What would you say to a friend? And we're so much kinder to a friend or a family member than we are to ourselves. And when we can channel self-compassion and realize like, nope, not everyone else in the world has everything figured out and are living like a seemingly uncomplicated, unproblematic lives. I know with social media, it's easy to do downward comparisons, or we look at people, or upward comparisons. And the research shows that comparisons either way don't really benefit us, especially with social media, because it's a curated kind of version of other people's lives. And so really channeling that self-compassion is just such a huge piece of being able to let yourself go into those spaces and those challenges as well. Yeah.
Especially for girls. I think I have 2 sons, but I know just from experiencing other people that have kids, girls, boys, and from being one myself, it's not, boys aren't doubting themselves as much as girls are. Boys aren't comparing themselves as much as girls are. It's like, we need to show young women that it's normal to be doing what you're doing, but you're not. There are lots of people, mostly boys, that aren't doing the same thing, and that's why they're getting ahead sooner. They're getting what they want sooner. They're not doubting themselves as much, et cetera, et cetera. We are so strong and fierce and smart, and we're doubting ourselves too much. Stay away from that social media. It's like, I'm so glad my boys are a little bit older, but they had it when they were younger, but not to the level it is now. And that's why I'm not on it much either, because it's just like you said, it's curated. It's what people want to show. It's not necessarily always real. And there's a benefit to it to some degree, but for the most part, it's just people feeling bad and comparing and lacking. And it's like, that's not going to create more of what you want in your life either.
No, I can't even imagine having gone through high school with social media. I could not fathom how that would have impacted me. And I just have so much empathy for preteens and teens that are going into this really vulnerable stage where your body's changing, you're figuring out who you are, you're finding your voice, and you're getting this just saturated with just messages about what, it means to be a woman or feminine or all of those things. And it's just so much empathy and just wanting to like normalize, like, no, like it's okay to feel awkward, and you don't have to have things figured out. You don't have to look these ways, and no, that person's not happy all the time. No one can be. We're humans.
I know. I'm so glad we didn't have to deal with that.
I know.
What would you tell? So Jacinta, what would you do? Is there anything, some people, there are things, and some people know there's nothing they wish they learned earlier. And I don't necessarily mean regret, but like if there's one thing you just now knowing, like walking onto that Stanford campus that day or listening to stories from your parents, is there anything you wish you learned a little bit earlier in your life or career?
Yeah, I think I always knew it because I grew up with the, Latino family. It's pretty big and stuff, but the power of connection, of really building out strong connections, but not just with anyone, with really great humans. So being a good people picker is what I call it. And surrounding yourself with people who are really there to hold space for you, and you hold space for them. I feel like community is getting broken down again because we're connected more than ever, but loneliness is becoming a problem because we don't have those deeper connections. And, there's a really amazing study at Harvard. It's one of the longest studies ever. It's of a human adult development. They looked at people over their lifespan it's 80 years and it's still going. Wow. And they looked at all kinds of variables about what made a flourishing or happy life. And out of the pages and pages, thousands and thousands of pages and data points, the biggest conclusion they found was that relationships, strong, healthy relationships. It's not quantity, it's quality, is what is one of the biggest contributors to a happy, meaningful, fulfilled life. And I think I knew I wanted friends, but I don't know if I knew the definition of deep connection and friendship to the point, where if it just is, and I have less friends now, but there's so much more meaningful friends, and valuing how important connection is, and prioritizing connections and attachments over achievements. And we're told achievement is so high, but I just think, gosh, attachments kind of at the end of the day, that's what you're left with.
For sure. I think it's important to note too that that maybe they are with your family. More than likely, they're not necessarily with your family. You have to go create them.
Yes. Yeah.
I know for me, big time, just friends I've had since I was in junior high school, mostly that before college. But even newer ones, just even a new friend could be someone who's a deep connection.
Yeah.
A man could be a woman. I think that's so important. I actually have a chapter about that in my book, Connections, because the whole reason I started this company, and that, was because of an experience I had in a conference 4 years ago, that I was feeling disconnected at my company. Everyone was virtual. This is before COVID-19 and everything, but everyone was working in their houses or their offices all over the world, and we weren't connected at all. And I was feeling very disconnected. So I created a program to help people feel more connected. So I had a problem, and I came up with a solution.
Yeah.
It sounds simple, but actually at the end of the day, it was kind of simple. But I was searching for something, and then other people were searching for the same thing I was searching for. But I had the same thing, no idea how truly important they were.
Yeah.
And my book is references of the book that I read when I gave this workshop. It's called The Power of the Other by Dr. Henry Bob, and he talks about the 4 powers of connection. And you said like being a good people picker, but those true like heartfelt connections, he calls them true connections, corner 4 connections. And those are the ones that are going to just make your life so much richer and more meaningful, and how to seek those out. So I talk a little bit about that in my book, because it is such an important concept, and it's not talked about enough. You don't say, you say networking, like if I was in college and I was telling them I could network more so you can get a good job one day, it's like, no, it's not really networking. Networking is the mechanism, but it's actually connecting to great people that you feel a kinship with, or whatever it is, and then nurturing them, finding them, nurturing them, and not just like letting them go and saying, okay, this is something special, and what can I do to perpetuate that? And he talks about, same as you said about that study, about like how you need it literally from the womb to the tomb. Connection. You need it the moment you're born, and you need it the day you die. It never goes away.
Yeah. And connections can be weak ties too, like these acquaintances you see at your yoga, and they smile at you, and they can be strong ties too. You can have both, and they can be newer connections too, but we're just kind of told, make friends, have fun, and achieve. And it's like, whoa, let's back up here. Be a good people picker, like be very intentional about who you give your precious time and energy to.
I love that. Be very intentional about who you give your precious time and energy to. I love that. That's an awesome lesson right there. Wow. Thank you so much, Jacinta. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I love talking to you.
Yeah, it's so fun. And I'm so happy you're putting the message out about meaning and normalizing things and the mind and body connection and all of it. So it's really fun.
So if people do you work with people one-on-one? If they want to get in touch with you or work with you, how does that work?
They can go to my website. It's the name of my book. So it's called the burnoutfixedbook.com. And then I do speaking and consulting. And you can learn about my book as well, which is about.
Right, you have a book. Yeah. So say the name of it again.
It's called The Burnout Fix, but it's a play on words. Fixed is like more about giving you a fixed set of core resilience capabilities to keep you stable and grounded while the world of work and life spins around you.
Ooh, I love it.
I'm really excited about it. And hopefully it spreads a message about these kind of things, connection, all these things that make us human. How do we go back to these core things that we really need?
Yes, I'm so glad you're doing that work. I can't wait to check out the book. Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm excited.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. I'm sure you learned a lot. And thanks, Jacinta, for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for listening. If you love this content, please rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or whichever platform you found us on. You can get all my social media links in the description below. Help us keep the momentum going so that every person can live their lives happily, doing work they love.